Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. Today we're going to talk about mental health, transformation, fitness. We have Rob Eastman here with us. Rob is a friend of Chris Burns, and Chris Burn It Up Coaching recommended Rob and said, Nicole, you've got to have him on your show. He's got an incredible story. So we're looking forward to hearing that story here today and sharing it with you. Rob, welcome to Leaders of Transformation.
Thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be here.
I'm grateful to have you. Yeah. And spend a few minutes. I know you're just out there making an impact. And so I always appreciate the leaders of transformation that come on this show that take a few minutes to share a little bit of their story, stop in the middle of their busy day. And so I appreciate that. And we appreciate the listeners. You know, I always say that I appreciate you as the listeners and the viewers, if you're watching on video, and because you're the reason why we do this show. Do this show because I love hanging out with really cool people. It inspires me, and that's really great. But more importantly, I want to share that with you so that you have the opportunity to be inspired and to be empowered and to be able to say, wow, if they can do it, maybe I can do it too. And that you can become the leader of transformation that you're capable of being. So afterwards, we'd love to hear your stories. You can go on leaderstransformation.com, find us on social media, Leaders of Transformation. Or, you know, just even reach out to us like direct. You can reach out to me directly. I just want to hear your stories and hear how this has impacted you. And I know our guests love to hear those stories as well. Also, if you like this interview, please go on iTunes, which is now Apple. I'm so used to saying iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and leave us a rating and review. It really does make a difference in terms of us getting a higher ranking and being able to have a wider reach. We have listeners in over 120 countries, and we just want to continue to expand that out. So we appreciate you doing that. All right. So Rob, let's talk about you. You are an entrepreneur, a leader, an innovator, and I seem to be stuttering today. I don't know why that is, but whatever. We'll go with it. You work with youth in the community and within school systems, and you run a lifestyle gym in Utah. You've got a recovery center a foundation that you are part of, the Eastman Family Recovery Foundation, and you host your own podcast, Stand and Fight. So got a couple of things on the go. So let's tell us a little bit more about what you're passionate about, how these things all kind of fit together.
I grew up in a good family, but my own life was just turmoil all the time from a very young age. And as I've gone through this, I'm a recovering addict. Recovery through PTSD and bullying and suicidal thoughts and depression and anxiety, everything. And I felt so alone for so many years. And once I started sharing my story, come to find out that I'm not alone. And I think a lot of us, when we feel those things, we feel like nobody's going to understand it. And it forced me to share my story more. And that became a passion of mine, and seeing how I could help adults, parents, but really the youth. I spent a lot of years, I'm coming up on 10 years clean and sober. And
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. In that time, I've worked with adults through mental health and addiction, and I've transitioned prisoners, and I've started working with youth and all these things. And I found, the one thing, I think the biggest thing that I could help with my story and my background is working on the prevention side. So it started with me and my son. He was playing baseball and I was cage fighting at the time. So to go from cage fighting lifestyle to sitting there in a baseball game in hopes that he gets a catch, in hopes that he gets up, I was like, buddy, we got to switch sports. And so he chose wrestling. And so I was about 4 years sober at the time. And I went to their first practice at the junior high school. And they looked at me and said, you need a background check if you want to be around the kids. And I was like, okay. And I went to the district and did the background check and the fingerprints. And they told me I'd hear back within 2 weeks. And I heard back the very next day. And they said, thanks, but no thanks. And in that moment, I got really insecure. And it's like I'd been clean and sober for 4 years. But all it took was one denial to make me feel less than and get anxiety and to feel depressed because people were judging me, all these feelings that came back. And that really woke me up. and I didn't want to be a piece of paper anymore. And in that moment, I printed off my background check, and I went in and I set an appointment with the guy. And when I sat down, I pushed it across the table and I said, "Where would you like to start?" And he kind of got ghostly white because he knew he just denied me the day before. And I shared my story with him. And at the end of that, he was teary-eyed and he stamped it approved and he said, "We need more coaches like you."
Wow.
That started me just wanting to spend time with my son. And within 1 year, I got a head coaching position at another school. I'd never wrestled. I had no clue in the sport at all. Been in a lot of street fights, if that counts, but. And really just seeing how the kids, they have enough teachers. They have the policeman telling them that don't do drugs or you'll get arrested. They have their parents telling them don't do this. But they never really had anybody telling them exactly what happens if they did. And they see me and, I've got the tattoos and when I would sit and I would explain things that, I'd see their behaviors, I'd be like, man, when I acted like that and I carried on and I worked on that bad behavior, I had to break it when I was 31. Like, if you don't learn how to do hard things now, you're going to really struggle as an adult. And next thing I know, the PTA teachers, they make fun of me. They're like, "We know who the most popular kid at school is." And because I'm just like one of the kids in the hallways, and the effect that I've had on the youth in my community by sharing my fails and being real and vulnerable it's insane. And that fueled my passion to become, I've been a recovery coach for coming on 9 years now. I've owned a gym for 9 years, and it's always been fitness. I use fitness as a way to teach people how to do hard things in a safe environment. I don't care about the bench press. I don't care how far or fast you run. I care that when you want to quit, that you don't, and you learn something from that. You continue to move forward in that moment.
Love it.
So that if life hits hard, if you're going through a divorce, if your car breaks down and it's freezing outside, do you sit in your car and freeze to death, or do you get out and you power through and get to a gas station and save, who knows, maybe it's your kids in the car, whatever it is. I just got this mindset that I needed to train my mind and my body and my spirituality to get to a place that no matter what life threw my way, that I was going to be able to overcome it. And over the last 9 years, it's really taken off in my community. I work closely with the police departments, the mayors, and all of that thing to restructure how things are done in our community and try to get rid of the judgment. I didn't go to prison. I got these tattoos because I want people to judge me off the bat, and then I want to sit down with them and I want to change their mind. And
Nice.
I think through being vulnerable and sharing my fails has brought a ton of success, not only in my life, but in the people I work with as well. And
Yeah, thank you.
I had a tough go in my first 9 months of sobriety. I got out of rehab. My wife, who had left me, and I had a 7-month-old baby daughter, they picked me up from rehab. They'd been coming to see me on family days, and she drove me home, and I got out of the car, and she didn't, and rolled the window down and said, "By the way, we're divorced." And I'm like, oh my gosh, why didn't you tell me while I was in rehab? And the reason I went to rehab is I was living in my parents' basement because my wife had left me. I couldn't keep a job. And my dad came down one day and he handed me a piece of paper and he said, "Read it." And I started reading it, and he had written my obituary. He said, "I know you're going to die, but you can't do it in my basement." And that's when I was homeless for about a week and ended up, I was going to go kill myself. And I had a experience with my Heavenly Father in that moment, and never looked back. So after my wife divorced me, and my dad, when he said he was done, he really meant it. So he quit paying my bills, and I had a house and I had a business and all these things that I wasn't paying for. About a month after my wife left me, the bank came in and took everything. And then at 9 months sober, my dad passed away. And it was those moments, it's like, okay, I got sober and life is supposed to be great. And why is my life like this? And it was like, God was the first time when he took my wife, he's like, "Do you hear me now?" And I couldn't humble myself enough to hear him. And he took everything that I owned and he said, "Can you hear me now?" and I didn't hear him. And then finally it took my, my last safety net, which was my dad, took that away. And that was the breaking point for me to, go out and make dang sure that if people wanted to walk my path, they were fully educated on what their decisions were going to look like. And I just really wanted to help. So that's where I live this. This isn't even a job for me. I am so, when people say life coach, it's like some people go get certified as a life coach and others are chosen as a life coach. And I didn't pick this job. It picked me. And so I'm riding it out, man. And I want to share my story and my fails as much as possible in hopes that somebody hears it. And we'll find out that people talk about the light at the end of the tunnel. And sometimes you can't see it. And that's when you just got to light your own torch and find your way out. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, those are the stories that I actually love hearing about. And similar to you, and our stories were not necessarily similar in the experiences, but we all go through a lot of different experiences in life. And like you said, I was chosen as a coach. I remember people saying, you'd be a great coach. Can you coach me? And I'm like, oh no, I'm not a coach. Not a life coach, business coach, or anything like that. And finally, I got into that, but, and it's been amazing. And then I realized, wow, I've been doing this my whole life. I just never really thought about it that way. So, and I love hearing the stories. Like you said, I'm living this. This is not a job. This is not something I do. This is who I am. And those are the stories that I think really change people's lives. One thing you said that it brought me back, actually, my dad, when I was like really, really young, 10 years old, in and around there somewhere, he took me downtown Toronto, which is where I grew up. And he took me to the roughest parts of town. And he said, I want you to be aware of what's going on. And number one, because I want you to be aware of your surroundings, because you're going to grow up and you're going to be, in places and I'm not going to be there. You're not going to have your brother there to protect you or anybody else, and so you need to be aware of those things. But number two is you got to recognize the choices you make. This is, there are consequences to those choices. And so rather than say, don't do it, just don't do it. He said, let me show you what happens if you do. Yeah. And it's not that I did, and not that I was, I was just a kid and I was just like, oh, he's like, did you see that? I'm like, see what? Yeah. Well, that person just handed that person something and this is what they were doing. And okay, got a Hooker Harvey's and okay, got it. I got a, a life education right there. And some people think, how could you do that to your child? It was one of the greatest gifts he gave me, because later on, when I was in high school and I was watching people do things, in my mind, it was like, yeah, mental note to self, I don't want to do that because this is what it's going to lead to. I already knew that, right? I'd already seen it. And even in high school, I saw some of the things people did. And I said, yeah, I don't really want to do that. And so I'm going to choose a different path. So, we all have life experiences. My experiences weren't that. Maybe there were other challenging experiences. We can't avoid them in life, but we certainly can set up our children and the next generation to not make the same mistakes as we made so that we can move forward. And so I love that you're so passionate about that. You also mentioned spirituality, and I know you're in Utah, heavily Mormon area. Pretty much everybody in the U.S. knows that. So I know that this church influence had a big impact on you. You mentioned that to me previously. So, and how it shaped your view of the world. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So early in elementary school, like I said, from day one, I was bullied. I had the red hair, my ears stuck out. I was the littlest kid on the playground. And when they're telling you you're stupid and ugly and dumb and worthless and all those things, and by the time in the LDS church or as a Mormon, you get baptized at the age of 8. And in that baptism is when you receive the Holy Ghost and that your sins are wiped free. But in my 8-year-old mind, I thought that meant that I'm going to be smart and I'm not going to be ugly and that people aren't going to bully me anymore. So I was so excited. And I got baptized and I went to school on Monday for this whole changed world and nothing was different. So at 8 years old, I'm already waging this war with God. Like, all these people around me lied to me. Nothing has changed. So I had my first suicidal thought in third grade. And I'm sure it's any religion, but it's like clean haircut, don't screw up, be perfect, and to live as a troubled little kid, I was ADHD, I was depressed, I'm all over the place. When I'm having conversations with people, they're like, I either make them feel uncomfortable or I'm too hyper to play with their kid, all these things. And so it really, once I got older and I started seeing, like, grew up in the 90s, so I was Kurt Cobain. I had bleached blonde hair and I had earrings, and that's a no-go, right? That's not how my community dresses. That's not what we're like. So I just felt kind of painted into the corner, and it really affected me. And rather than finding my own spirituality, like, I didn't know the two were separate. I thought religion and spirituality were the same thing. And I was told what it was from such a young age, that this is what you're going to believe in, this is how it's going to go. And it did not go that way for me. So rather than find my own thing, I was like, screw religion. Like, you spiritual people are stupid. You judge, you're all hypocrites. So it took me once my dad died, it's like, look, I have nothing. I am so rock bottom. Like, I don't know how I could be any lower and not die. And at that point, I had to redefine success, and I took the dollar signs out of it. And what did that mean to me? That meant me being happy with the person looking back in the mirror. Like, my dad he owned car dealerships. He was a state senator. He was the school board president. He was all of these things, and I just wasn't. On top of, I didn't fit into the religious culture in my community. So as my dad's setting the laws, I'm breaking them, and I'm breaking all the 10 commandments. And I'm like, it piled up, and to the point where I focused as much hatred towards that rather than positive energy towards me. I projected outwards, trying to defend myself because I've been bullied for so long. It was like I became a bully killer, I guess. It's like it created this nasty rabbit hole of just, didn't matter which way I went, there was just something waiting for me, some insecurity, somebody else let me know how good I wasn't. And I'm sure it's the same as living in Boston with the Catholics, or I'm sure it's just a stronghold of a higher learning, but I feel like it's more of like a fashion show to go to church rather than a hospital for the sick.
Yes.
I think it's changing a little bit, but when you're raised up in that community and you just don't fit in, or your family's afraid to talk about what's going on because they don't want to air their dirty laundry, your secrets keep you sick. And I got really, really sick.
Yeah.
And then when I redefined what my God looked like, I imagined if he loved me even a quarter of what my dad did, then I'm fine. He's not gonna, if I arrive in heaven, he's not gonna be like, you drank coffee, you're a loser, you're out of here. You had sex before you were married. I think he's gonna be like, hey, what'd you learn? Was that a good idea? I think he's gonna be way more compassionate. And once I started thinking that way, man, my spirituality blossomed. And people, like, again, they see my neck tattoos and everything, and I'm talking about God and spirituality, and people are like, what? They see me at church, or I do a wide spread of things. We go to Indian sweat lodges, and we go to the Catholic church, and we go to Mormon church, and we go meditate in the mountains, and I find something amazing in every single one. Once I can step back and not feel judged, because I know everybody's dealing with something. I know that now. There's no question about it. I could go in any house in the U.S. and be a fly on the wall and find some weird thing going on that they're afraid to talk about. And I want to get that conversation going.
Yeah.
Nobody's alone. Doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah. Everybody's wearing these masks, and when you talk about identity, and judgment, there's so much of that going on. I mean, there's an identity crisis going on in the world.
Absolutely.
And, on so many levels, but it when you come back to that, I love what you said there. If God loved me just even a quarter of, the amount that my dad loved me, then I'll be okay. And I believe that. It's like we can say God is love, but if God is love, then where's all this judgment come from? And I actually had the I grew up, my parents worked 7 days a week, so we never went to church. And one day, and they would have said that they were Christian, right? Believed in Christian values and so forth, but they were working 7 days a week, right?
Yeah.
And so one day we were driving down this road, and I said to my mom, I said, "Oh, that's such a beautiful building. I like architecture." So, like, "Oh, that's such a beautiful building. You think one day I might be able to go in there?" And she said to me later, she said that was a church, and they had the glass, stained glass,
Yeah.
and she's like, "What kind of a mother am I? She doesn't even know that's a church, let alone hasn't been in it." And it stopped her thinking that, and started to think about that. And so, anyway, I mean, my parents still continued to work really hard and stuff, but I became a Christian when I was 14. And it actually was a blessing to me that I would go into churches and I just didn't feel anything. All I felt was judgment, or being the little girl, the young girl. You get the ladies with their big hats. They used to do a fashion show, the big hats, and they're like, "Bless you, my child." And immediately in my brain, I've always had a BS meter, so in my brain I'm thinking, yeah, you probably yell at your kids on Monday, like, don't give me that "bless you, my child" thing, like, just be you. Like, it was just weird. And
Yeah.
so the blessing in that was that I sought to read scripture, and I just asked God, like, "God, you tell me. This is supposed to be from you, so you tell me what it says, right? Explain it to me."
Yeah.
And I was able to largely circumvent that human construct of what church is. And it
Yeah.
is changing now. There's a lot of amazing churches out there, but there's still a lot that are empty. And
Yeah.
there's still, so it's all the human construct that we put around it. But as soon as you get free from that and you go, wow, this is actually a wonderful love story, and a really, and even Jesus was like a rebel, I
Yeah.
mean, he wasn't prim and proper, and he didn't hang out with all of that. That was what pissed them all off, right? Is he didn't hang around with all of the religious leaders,
Yeah.
And so you look at that and you go, oh, wow, he was a rebel like you,
Yeah.
right? He was the guy who's basically, like, I'm talking in general terms here, but it's like you and I just went, hey, I'm not trying to fit into anything. I'm actually here to disrupt it.
Yeah.
So it's really,
Yeah.
really interesting.
That's how I really felt. I went with BYU, which is a Mormon church, and I went to school in Israel for 6 months when I was 18. And seeing the culture of all those different religions, they're just battling each other. It's like, how is that godlike, right?
Yeah.
And I just went a couple of years ago to Mount Everest, and we spent a lot of time with the lamas, which is the Buddhist priests and things like that. And they're just like, the karma thing is so easy. Do good, get good. Do bad, get bad. Like, how that's pretty simple. Like, I can get on board with that. So I just find so many different things in different religions that make sense, and I find some that are just nonsense.
Yeah.
So it's I wish there was more options for people to seek for themselves and open themselves up, rather than trying to find the magic pill or the magic verse or the magic book it's like, man, listen to yourself for a minute. What do you need? Not what does your mom want for you? What does your dad want for you? What does your town want for you? What do you want for you? And go do that. And that's kids especially, they're so afraid to let their parents down, that they chase that carrot that they have no interest in, and they know they have no interest in it, just to get an attaboy from mom and dad. And I think that's where the suicide rate is coming up with these kids, is there's so much pressure, and that no matter what the achievement, they get to the top of that blind peak and they see they're not even close to the top, and they're like, man, I just gave you everything I got. I can't do it anymore. And that's scary, and it's sad. And I was that kid, and I can only imagine if I had social media. And back then I felt pretty bad about myself, but if I could grab my phone and see just how bad I was compared to the other kids, I might have killed myself. So this technology age with instant gratification and everything else, and then you get the online bullies going after you. I mean, there's a pretty tough deal that we're living in. So I think this spirituality side is so important, to go out, check in with yourself, quiet everything down, slow down, don't power through. A lot of those times is when you're sitting in the pain, you need to sit there and understand what your body and what your spirit's telling you, rather
Yes.
than tighten up your bootstraps and push through. You're missing a lot of open doors.
Yes.
So I find it important to shut up sometimes and sit in my anxiety and sit in my pain and sit in my depression and be like, okay, this is a good feeling to have, because it's letting you know something's wrong,
Yes.
rather than take a pill for it to numb it out, because it's still there. When that pill wears off, it's still gonna be there. So why not find out what it's about?
Yeah.
And I wish I would have learned that at 13 instead of 31, but here we are. So.
Well, and now you can go back and you can teach these kids based on awareness, how they can avoid it, but learn through your experiences. So what do you recommend? You mentioned about finding out, like, what do you want, as you mentioned that you talk to kids about that. And in terms of their identity, because they may never get that attaboy from a parent. There are some parents that just don't have it in them, because hurting people hurt people. How do you help them to come to that realization of who they are and that they are wholly loved and accepted, without sounding weird and churchy? And, because it's so funny. I mean, as I said, I've been a Christian for a long, long time, and yet I've never really gotten into that whole, the weirdness of it. So, how like when people switch and then they all of a sudden become weird and start talking in like a different language and start to, bless you, my child kind of thing. It just never really resonated with me. I just operated from who I was. And then through that, conversations opened up about it. But so how do you do that, where you can invite these kids who are struggling, who do want to have a sense of belonging and a sense of identity?
So a big part of it, and one that I see a lot, is either a boy or a girl who doesn't have their mom or their dad, and they're craving that relationship that they never had. They've made it this idea of what it was like or would be like, and they're just wasting all of the relationships they have actually in their life. And I just sit down like, you understand poker?
Yeah.
Okay. So you get a 2 and a 5, you still got to play the game. Like this is the hand you were dealt. Are you going to fold, or are you going to play the game? Your dad may never come into your life. Is that going to mean you're going to chase that dream and waste everything else that you're great at and all the people that love you? And a lot of times they'll just have to sit there, and it's like, it all comes back to that self-love. I have a daughter that's 10 and a daughter that's 11. Some people think I'm hard on them. It's like your dad. I take them to the homeless shelter. We drive downtown Salt Lake to show them where the drugs are done and the prostitution and the gas station corners. And then they do boxing, they wrestle, they do jujitsu, because through that, doing hard things that are normally a man's deal, the way we're raising men this day are pretty sissy. I can't trust that my daughters are going to be able to be protected, one, and I don't want their self-worth to be dependent on a man saying, oh, you're beautiful, you're worth it. I want them to fill their own cup. Plug the holes, fill your own cup, know your worth. You go out, you charge your dreams, and you're going to find the right guy.
Yes.
Period.
Yeah.
And if that's not being taught, they're being taught that they're amazing just how they are, and da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, you're not great. You can be better. You can, like, it's okay to be where you're at, but you need to move forward. You need to understand you better than people pleasing. Like you said, I talk a lot about wearing masks. And it's like, we try, especially kids, they try so hard to fit in. They spend more time being an actor than they do understanding themselves.
Yes.
It's like,
and
so
wonder why they're unhappy.
Yeah. I sit down with the families and I'm like, okay, they study math for an hour a day, science, biology. How much time do you ask them to spend understanding themselves? They don't.
Yeah.
So I feel like a kid that understands his emotions and communicate them well will do better than a kid that's a 4.0 student, goes to Harvard, that's socially inadequate.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. There's the educational system is not supporting people and the kids to become healthy, functional adults
Yeah.
Teaching, like algebra and calculus and all that's great to know whether or not you want to get into further into that field.
Yeah.
But these life skills, and I had another gentleman on who's the founder of Mind Valley, who was on Vision. And so he was talking about how they're disrupting the educational system, totally turning, you can do the basics, math, reading, all that. You can do that in a shorter amount of time and then spend the rest of the time on life skills like this.
Yeah.
That's what we need. And the fact that life is moving so fast and there's different demands that there were 50, 100 years ago. 100 years ago, okay, so, everything went slowly and, and they were actually training employees. But now that's not where a lot of people are getting into. And so, yeah. And then social media is a big one, like you mentioned. Man, just turn it off, turn it off. Like use it as a tool, not a crutch. Use it as a way to connect to people, quality connecting with people, and then turn it off. Like I just, you can so quickly, and myself too, you get on there and you're like having a good day and then you're looking at some of these things, or somebody's like, I'm offended by blah, blah, blah. And you're thinking, I don't have time to deal with this, and it can bring you down. Right. But there's so much pain. My heart goes out though to people. There's so much pain, so much suffering, so much lack of love out there.
Yeah. I think, you remember back in junior high, your first breakup or something, and you had to deal with that. Now it's like you get the breakup, everybody finds out about it by a text message blast or Instagram blast across the school, and you get to see the picture of your significant other that you just lost kissing another girl or boy.
Yeah.
Like just smeared in their faces. And I can't remember, I just heard it, somebody was talking about, we have age limits on cigarettes, on alcohol, on drugs, on all this. We know phones are addictive. We know gaming's addictive, but we're over there handing the 2-year-old the iPad.
Yeah.
What do you think's going to happen?
Yeah.
They're not learning. They don't need to communicate. It's like we had to actually walk up and ask a girl out and have the possibility of being told no in front of your friends. Now it's like text message, boom. No, you can ask out 7 girls in one day in hopes that one says yes. There is no fear to it. And they're just missing out on the social side of things. When, we have, I live on a farm, and when we have barbecues or people over, I have a basket at the door. Don't come to my house and bring your phone. I don't want to see something on YouTube. I don't care.
Yeah.
For the time you're with me, be with me.
Yes.
Can't do that. Like, I'm on call. No, you're not. Put your phone away or go be on call.
Yeah.
But I don't want to sit here and waste my time with people that are more interested on some fake feed than nature and having a bonfire.
Yes.
I think
it's like life is happening on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. Life is happening right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like TV. When I was growing up, I learned this. My parents, were always very active, entrepreneurial and so forth. And so, I would go to seminars. I was in personal development, very young age. And, they talked about TV and they're like, look, that's like the great economic, suck, right? Is like sitting in front of this TV and watching the world go by. And my dad used to have this saying. He said, there are 3 kinds of people that make things happen, people that watch things happen, and then people who go, what the hell happened?
Yeah.
He says, like, don't be in that last group. And even the second group, like, don't watch it happening and saying, wow, did you hear what so-and-so did? No, I'm too busy living. You are too busy living your life.
Yeah.
To know what somebody else, it's great for them. Great. Have a good time. Yeah. Awesome. While I go live my life as well. So
yeah. I think it's super important.
Just even pointing that out to kids so that they actually stop and go, yeah, I guess I am watching somebody else live their life. Duh. Why am I doing that?
Yeah. Yeah. I've got kids on my wrestling team, things like that. What'd you do this weekend? Oh, I just hung out with my friends. What'd you guys do? Played Fortnite? Were your friends with you? Well, they were at their house. They think it's hanging out by having a headset and you can hear their voice through the thing. It's like, man, you guys are missing out. They'll play 36 hours straight when the new game comes out. And it's like, man.
There's so much more to live.
The breaking point for me, we used to live just in a town a little bit south of or north of Salt Lake. and we were in a little duplex, and I was just getting my business up and running. And I told my kids, my son and my two daughters were sitting on the couch, middle of the summer. I'm like, go outside. And they like, there's nothing to do out there. And I snapped. And that's why I called my wife and said, we're going to go broke, but let's find horse property and we're going to teach these kids some lessons. I don't care if I go bankrupt after a year, but they're going to be mucking horse stalls and taking care of animals. You know, whether it's 20 degrees outside or 120 degrees outside, they're going to have some real chores. And it's been a blessing. Like my kids, they don't ever take their phone. It's like, you need to take your phone so I can get a hold of you. But like, that was the point, right?
Yeah.
So that, you know, we didn't die. We didn't have seatbelts. We could sat in the back of a truck, you know. So trying to balance this thing, super important. And I think a lot of parents are lacking in parental skills. It's easier to be a friend than it is setting rules and keeping to the boundaries.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's what people always say. How's business? And I say, unfortunately, great. You know, because I work with addicts and I work with kids who are parents and families in crisis. And unfortunately, my future is looking great.
Yeah.
You know. And
yeah, it's funny because our goal is
business.
actually to work our way out of a job, out of a business,
Yeah,
because we
that's
don't
my
want to.
goal.
We actually would want the greatest thing would be to be obsolete.
Yeah, I want to be not needed, but unfortunately, I can't go. Like right after this, I've got an emergency meeting with a family, and then I've got another intervention right after that. It's like, it's sad. It's really, 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 really sad. And
well, Rob, thanks for coming in. I know that you've got lots going on. That's why I said in the beginning, I just so appreciate you taking time to talk about stuff that you're actually out there doing. And so the very best thing that you can be doing is to be out there and not just talking about it, you know.
Yeah.
But this gives us an opportunity to share with a lot more other people, you know, that wow, you know what? Yeah, maybe I need to have these conversations with my kids, or yeah, you know what? This is what I can do in the community. And so hopefully it has inspired some of our listeners to get out there and make something of their life and make a difference in their community. So thank you very much for that.
I really appreciate what you're doing. It's definitely helpful and needed.
My pleasure. Well, as long as we go out and do something with the information, I always say, you know, podcasts are great, going to seminars is great, but when it really comes down to it, it's about taking action.
Yeah.
It's about getting out there, you know, and that's where the magic actually happens. And so it's like you, after this call, is going to work with that family or do whatever, you know, that's where the magic happens. So for those of you that are listening and or watching, you know, go to check out what Rob's doing. He is on Instagram. That's primarily where he is on social media, which is Coach Eastman 8, his Instagram feed. Well, make sure this is all in the show notes as well, or eastmanfitnessutah.com. You can check him out there. And but take action. Do something. You know what? Even if it's for yourself, after you're finished with this podcast, turn off your phone, wherever you're listening to this, your iPad, whatever, turn it off and just be quiet and still and just listen to the conversation that's going on in your head. You might need to empty it out because some of those voices are not going to be positive voices. They may be disempowering voices, and starting to notice, wow, I have disempowering voices. I have empowering voices. What am I going to listen to? How am I going to choose to live my life? So I encourage you to take action. We love to hear your story. You can go on leaderstransformation.com. You can find us on social media. Love to hear your stories. And we appreciate you being here. Again, Rob, thank you for being here. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon.
I know. Thank you.